All right, we are live for episode 12. It is going to be Eddie Soto of Serpentera Exotics. He is currently going through a few technical malfunctions trying to update an iPad, so you're going to get to hang out and hear me for just a little bit. But I am super excited to talk to him when he's able to come on. He has a really eclectic collection of lizards, a number of different geckos and monitors, and then gets into some really weird stuff like serrated coneheads and helmeted iguanas and different things. He also has a pretty varied collection of box turtles and tortoises, which I thought was really cool. He's another one of those Florida guys that cheats. He gets to keep everything outside. So I thought it was pretty neat to be able to talk to him. I really like to get people on that have different experiences. I obviously live in the Midwest, so I'm just now coming into the time of year where I can even put anything outside. My sulcata just went outside today, actually. So it's pretty cool to talk to people that are able to do things full time. So as soon as he gets everything up to par on his end for his iPad, he will log on with us. As I was messaging back and forth with him, and it is his daughter who is in charge of the technology for him. So he's trying to get it updated. So that's no big deal. We're Phil Wolf started our trend. We're used to guests showing up a little bit late, so that's no big deal. You guys can hang out and listen to me talk while I message with Eddie and don't look at the camera and look down at my phone. What's up, Jeff? I am letting Eddie know to hop in when he is able. So he is coming. He just has to get some tech on his end. He was talking to me today. He was cranking out Reptile Shows, has been for the past several weekends. It sounded pretty amped up. So it sounds like he had a really good day at the show. So hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit about that. Here in the Midwest, haven't had a whole lot of shows going on. They just recently had Sewer Fest and waiting for the Schaumburg NARBC that is going to be in June. And then I believe there's another Sewer Fest in August. For those that aren't Midwest, that is the Southeastern Wisconsin Exotic and Reptile Fest, I think is how they do sewer. Anyway, local show just across the border in Southeast Wisconsin. Very tight-knit crew, a lot of the same vendors over and over again. Have awesome stuff. It's really cool if you're in the Midwest and you can get up there. Great group of people. So it's definitely something to check out. And then, of course, NARBC is massive. Everybody kind of knows what that is. And this year is going to be a little bit different. But they're going to be in a town, Schaumburg, which is not too far away from the place they normally are, but it's a pretty significant change considering how many years they've been in Tinley Park and how set up things were. So it's cool that they're able to continue to do it, though. So I'm happy. Already got my hotel room. I'm good to go. Even though I'm local, I'm definitely not going to be driving back and forth. So I'll go up there and chill out. Turtle Talk Pocket. So my son is listening on his YouTube channel and giving me another view, which is awesome. Actually, the only collection updates we have are a turtle and another amphibian. We added to our three-toe Amphiuma collection with a bruiser 10-year-old female who is humongous compared to the two that I have. She is bigger than them, but not quite big enough to be have them on the menu. So the three of them are living together. Seem to be doing okay. Everybody chills out, eats earthworms. Amphiumas are really weird, but super easy to care for. And then the other one that we got through Friends of Scales Reptile Rescue was a Florida softshell turtle. I already have a very small individual for Florida softshells, but they can get significantly larger than the softshells here in the Midwest. So I was pretty happy to get a larger example. It's probably 8 inches across. It's a decent sized turtle. And I was fortunate that Big R, which is a brand here in the Midwest, it's sort of like Farm and Fleet, Tractor Supply Co. type of thing for folks that might know what that is if you live in a rural area. The Big R brand of stores was going out of business, so I was able to get several very large troughs on sale. So that particular Florida softshell, I'm going to set up a fake sandbar in a trough that is It's somewhere between 250 and 300 gallons. It's like 5.5 feet wide. It's not quite a circle. It's one of those weird little ovals with like a flat side where, a trough is meant to kind of sit up against the barn wall type of thing. So I put the flat side is going to be toward the wall of the basement. And then my goal is, I think I'm going to put another trough inside of that and then fill that with sand and kind of have it slope out and make a fake sandbar. I think that'd be pretty cool. I got to try and figure out what I want to do plant wise to grow in that and then have some sort of wood structure coming out. Most of the soft shells I have don't really care to bask. When they do, they typically do come up on some sort of modified sand structure. Because if I have soft shells, I always use sand structures. They're able to live on other things, but I figure if it's in captivity, I'm not going to risk tearing them up because they do have softer skin. So I always offer sand structure. So as opposed to Jessica, I will absolutely post pictures. But as opposed to doing, like musk turtles and stuff straight up just hang out on logs and then flop off when they're scared. When you get into things like soft shells, it's much more of a streak down the sand, like the stereotypical, sea turtle baby flapping on the beach. Soft shells are very similar. If they bask, they're going to bask in an area where they can just shoot off, as opposed to dunking into that deep water. They actually cruise off into the sand because they're actually not traveling all that far. They're going to sand where they feel like they can get out of your sight, and then they're digging down. Whereas your pond turtles, your musk turtles and things, they're literally just going to bail off, high dive in and go as deep and dark as they can to where you can't see them. It's just a different methodology, I guess, for escaping predators. But then you kind of have to take that into account when you're building for those species. All of which has nothing to do with lizards, is completely a turtle related thing. But since my son was listening and he does the turtle podcast, I figured I'd throw you guys some turtle facts. But yeah, Jessica, I for sure will post pictures as I go through that build. And then of course the finished product. I found quite a few more different pages for plants, especially aquatic plants and different terrarium things on Etsy. I've been digging through some pages there. I didn't really think of that as a site to look at for folks that cultivate plants, but there's a ton of cool pages on there. So actually, while we're hanging out waiting for Eddie, I will tell you guys the most recent one that I found because I thought it was really cool. It is an Etsy page called Creation Cultivated. It is all one word, and they are out of Georgia. And they have a ton of different cuttings, mostly small terrarium plants, dart frog type of things. But they did have several aquatic plants. And so that's something I'm always looking for. It gets more difficult when you get into the pond turtles and things because they eat them. And so ideally, like I'd love to have, a layer of duckweed and then your snapping turtles live under that. And it does the ambush predator thing that everyone thinks of. But your pond turtles just mow through that like lettuce. They don't care. So it looks cool for a week or two. And then you wonder where it all went. And then that's where it went. They ate it. But it's kind of our fault for using floating turtle pellets. It all just mixes in and they down it. So same way with our redfoot tortoise has conveniently eaten several banana trees because you can eat banana leaves, humans do, and so can those tortoises. And so when he gets bored, or if I apparently don't feed him enough, even though he is slightly fat, even for a tortoise who should not have armpit rolls, he'll climb right up there and just pull the leaves off that tree. So I love the fact that terrestrial tortoises, people always tell you, oh, they're terrestrial, heavy body, don't climb, so on and so forth. I have several that do. That's just not true. All right, Eddie's here. Let's add him to the stream. All right. What's up, man?
How you doing?
Good. Got the iPad all figured out?
Not at all. I'm actually using my phone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you are good.
Cool. Well,
So
it's coming in.
I'm holding it, so it's going to be a little jumbly.
Oh, that's okay. The people on the podcast won't notice, and the people on YouTube will throw up in their own house, so I'm not worried.
It's perfect.
No, I was just talking to folks in the intro, telling everybody that I was scrolling through social media feeds as I do, and your collection is really eclectic, I guess. It's varied, You're one of the guys that I like to give a hard time because you can cheat and you keep things outside, which is also super cool. And yeah, I thought the things that you keep seem to be very specific. Helmeted iguanas, serrated coneheads, very specific animal species. You're posting the geckos like Pictus geckos, and it's
Yep.
not just your run of the mill things. You seem to have a very specific type of thing you're going for. And even, you post some throwback pictures of snakes and stuff, it was Angolans or spotted pythons.
Yeah.
Even then it wasn't run of the mill stuff.
Yep.
It seemed to be very specific things that you were going for. So yeah, man, just kind of talk folks through, like, what are you keeping and how goes it?
So I started off with snakes. I started off with a lot of snakes, and in fact, the Angolans is kind of like a sad story because every time people mention it, it hurts because I sold them. I sold an adult pair, producing pair. So that was 2016, and at the time, that's still something that people don't do. So every time those pictures pop up on Facebook, as far as like the memories go, it kills me inside that I got rid of them. So yeah, as far as the other snakes, I'm kind of okay with them not being here. But the Angolans are one of those things that I'm just like, it hurts me. And if you also look, if you really dig deep in there, I think in 2012 I had like the ring pythons as well, and that was another thing. That was another thing I got rid of. That fast forward 2021, I'm not going to get ring pythons for what I paid for back in like 2012. It's not going to happen.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
so
that happens to all of us.
yeah,
But
and it's funny because if you actually dive into my Facebook, you'll see I have an album, and the album's actually called My Regrettable, like basically it's things that I regret getting rid of, and you'll see pretty much things that people will not have in their normal collections that I got rid of. So yeah, it hurts a little bit seeing some of that stuff, but yeah, I'm beyond the snakes. I still have some snakes, but I'm more focused on the lizard stuff for sure.
Okay.
And
was the snake transition, is that because you're able to keep so many things outside, you just didn't want to give up the indoor space, or you just made the transition because your interests changed, or what brought you that direction?
I've always pretty much, snakes was the first thing that I started breeding.
Okay.
Lizards were the first thing that I've kept, though. I've been keeping iguanas probably since the mid to early 90s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was so basically, long story short, I've always wanted an iguana, and my parents forbid it. Like, no way that you're going to have a pet lizard ever. That's just something that normal people don't do. So luckily for me, my parents, well, not luckily for me, but my parents went through a divorce, and I actually took it really affected me. So one of the things that I guilted my mother on was like, hey, I'd feel a lot better if I had an iguana. Me in elementary school in the 90s, okay, go get your iguana. So back then, when you go to a store, they would have things labeled all weird. So I picked out an iguana. I picked out a blue iguana, but again, back then, a blue iguana isn't what it is now. Like we know that's an axanthic blue iguana, but back then, a blue iguana in the 90s was basically a regular baby green iguana that just had more blue pigment near the dewlap and the face. It was just a regular green iguana that color would fade. But back then it was like, oh, cool, that's a blue iguana. But and then from there later on, I had snakes, and then people would know me as like the snake guy or the reptile guy. So someone gave me a ball python. This is like late 90s. And then I acquired another one, and I just threw them together because I didn't know any better. And then they locked up. So I was like, okay, that's weird. So I didn't know anything about breeding back then. So I went, and there was no real internet back. It was all dial-up. So I researched it, and I realized that people do this for a living, and not just snakes, but everything. And people had careers doing this, and that was baffling to me. So even at a young age, I'm like, I'm gonna do this, and I got laughed at, so which was funny.
Yeah,
but that's pretty much my origin story.
Track.
Yeah, that's pretty much my origin story. I've never stopped. I failed many times, but I pretty much have it dialed in now. And yeah, I do keep snakes, but mostly it's the lizards. They're more entertaining to me. I'm
Okay.
more fascinated in what they do. So
Sure.
but,
So you post quite a bit with the monitors, and then you post a ton of success breeding the Coneheads,
yeah,
and then everything else is kind of scattershot, a little bit eclectic. You
yeah.
just post your collection kind of as you go. So are monitors more, you're just keeping monitors because you want to keep them, or is that something you're also trying to breed, or
Hey,
you have
if
some
they
things you keep
breed,
and some things
then
you breed, or are you just kind of all of the above?
right. So I do have things that I keep for fun. So like for instance,
Okay.
my Aldabra is almost 3 years old. There's no point in me ever even trying to breed an Aldabra, but that's just my pet. That's my baby. Um, the
Sure.
monitors, if they
I'm
breed,
super jealous of that.
that's yeah. It's still amazing that I have that animal. Um, the monitors are something that I had an opportunity to work with, and I was a fool to not take on that responsibility of keeping them, and so I had the opportunity to take on some adult white throats. So if they breed, and that's awesome. If they don't, I really enjoy keeping them. So who knows?
Sure. I mean, that you have to, right?
Yeah,
That's, I mean, you need to enjoy it first and then
yeah,
make more for other people, or
yeah,
just for you and keep
100%.
them all.
I don't know about that part with all those
Um,
monitors.
well, yeah, monitors, that changes the game a little bit when you're in
Yeah,
barns
yeah,
for
yeah.
lizards. I saw you post just recently. You had like two big things of apple snails, and
Yes,
we're
yes.
messing with those. How did, I mean, did they just smash those? How did that go?
So I literally just moved to a new property, maybe less than 6 months ago, um, about an acre,
Okay.
a little less than an acre, and there's a little trench in my backyard. Um, it's full of apple snails, bullfrog tadpoles, bullfrogs, crayfish, you name it, it's in there. Um, so I would throw like a minnow trap. I fill it with romaine lettuce, spring mix, and I would collect it every morning, and there'd be tons of apple snails in there. And I'm like, what could eat this? And then bingo, my white throats. That's something that's almost a natural food for them to eat. So I put them
For
in the
sure.
freezer. I never feed it to them live. I put it in the freezer, and then later
Yeah.
on I thaw them out. I do have to, so for the larger ones, because these things are huge. So for the larger apple snails, once they're thawed out completely, I do kind of crack the shell for them,
Okay.
um, and they'll eat the whole thing. But for them, they really enjoy it, and it's free. I collect them by the
Yeah.
dozens. So and crayfish as well. But yeah, that's how I get those apple snails.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's very cool.
yeah.
Um, so what which came first? Were you just kind of Noah's Ark going as you went, or did you start out with the smaller species and move up to monitors, or how did you approach that?
No, there's no rhyme or reason to my collection whatsoever.
Nice.
It's pretty much like I go to shows or I do research and I see these animals that I'm like, holy crap, like this is something that I'll probably never get the chance to work with. And then years later, and with connections of people that I know, like some of these opportunities just pop up and I take them.
Sure.
Um, so, so for instance, the coneheads, the serrated coneheads, I saw those probably in 2012 or 11 in Daytona Expo, and I saw them on I'm gonna forget this name, Tremper's Lizard Ranch, and he only had like a few deli cups, and one of those deli cups was a serrated conehead lizard, and I was like, and it was a crazy price, and I was like, man, that animal's weird looking. That's a weird looking animal. It doesn't look real. One day I'll work with that. fast forward years later, I have the opportunity that just pops up, and it's a trio. Wild caught, they look terrible. That's an animal that just naturally on their own, they're a very slender animal.
Okay.
So when they're wild caught, from importation and they're not eating and they're dehydrated, they look even worse. They're
Right.
basically pencils. So I had the opportunity to work with them. I got them. Didn't even know the sexes on them. I couldn't tell what was what. I actually had to contact, I don't even know if he remembers this, but I actually contacted Frank Payne many years ago when I was sending him pictures of the vents. What is this? What do I have? And he actually had bred them before. So he kind of schooled me on what I was. And now for me, it's no brainer. Now I look at them, I could tell you male, female, no problem. But back then I didn't know.
Sure.
And I couldn't get any information as far as like how to keep them. So I had to go on like iNaturalist, and I went on a bunch of things that weren't even English websites, seeing like where they come from and trying to figure it out. And then from there, I would see like what city they come, like what cities around, and I would go on, Google, see the temperatures, and I would try to mimic that. And then lo and behold, I had a female that looked like she was gravid. She was, and she laid eggs, they hatched, and people started flooding my inbox as far as like, oh, you just got wild caught animals. She was gravid. And at the time I had her for several months. So I was like, oh, you're probably right. She was wild caught. She was gravid. That's fine. I don't care. Now I have captive bred babies. But then the following year,
I mean, how it happened,
then,
whatever, man, it worked.
Yeah, it didn't matter. Yeah. But then the following year, that same female bred again. I'm like, okay, now it's not a fluke. Like they're breeding.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And then I actually usually saw the male, breeding with another female. So yeah, I've been breeding those and actually hatching them since 2017 now.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and then I've even had the chance to work with the other species as well. Longippies. I bred that as well, which is like
cool.
I think they call it like the Eastern conehead. It's more smooth. It's not serrated at all.
Right.
Yeah. So
now, is that something where have you just maintained that trio, or have you brought in more animals, or how have you done that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who have bought them, had no luck with them, and then little by little, people would just contact me randomly. Hey, I have this conehead. Do you want it? It's doing nothing. It's by itself, and it's almost impossible to find like another of the opposite sex. So I would meet these people. I would drive hours and get them. So I did build the collection up, and I did hold back animals. And so at one point I had like a breeding group of probably over 10 animals, adults.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So I think I probably produced over 60 so far.
Wow.
And I made sure a lot of the other breeders had them as well.
Yeah.
So like for instance, Ron St. Pierre and Heather, they have a big group of mine, my original stock. They have
That's
probably
awesome.
my original F1s they have, for F2s. I'm not sure, but they have a good group.
Okay. So. Yeah, and that, I mean, when you start to get into species like that, people in the hobby who get farther down the rabbit hole like that, it is one of those things where, you see somebody like yourself who's having success, and then if you just personally own one as a pet, like it almost kind of feels like you're wasting it, because it, like you're having success. So hopefully the species will become more prevalent, but it isn't right now. If you have one, that, and it's like, man, I don't want it to go to waste. Like it feels like it should be with someone like yourself who can then have success. And then if I'm just going to keep one as a pet, I'll do it later on when, things
when there's when there's more. Yeah. I actually have a funny story about that. So probably a couple years ago, I had some conehead babies for on display. They weren't even for sale. I was just showing off. And this random lady, like, just showed up, walked around. She saw the lizard, and I don't, you've probably done reptile shows before, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And people look at certain animals that they have no idea what it is, but they'll tell you like, oh, I have that, or that's in my yard. Like, I have that in my backyard. So this random lady, like a soccer mom, she looks at my coneheads and she's like, I have that. So I kind of shrug her off. I kind of play along like, oh, that's cool. Like, I'm just I know you don't have it, but yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, you have it. And she's like, no,
Right.
I really have, she's like, I really have that animal. And I'm like, she's like, I have pictures too. I'm like, okay, now you're catching my interest. So she showed me the picture. Sure enough, it's a serrated conehead lizard, full grown adult female. She bought it from underground, just because she thought it was cool. Not, she didn't even know what it was. She thought it was cool and just purchased it. And so I was like, oh
Wow.
man, like, yeah, it was great. It was immaculate shape. So, I'm not trying to buy other people's animals or force them to give them to me, but I was just like, hey, if you ever want to get rid of this animal,
Right.
just keep
Yeah.
my, yeah, just keep me in mind, because these animals are not coming in and bloodline is kind of scarce. So maybe a couple months later, she contacted me. She's like, you know what? I've researched, because she had my information at that point. So she researched everything I was doing. And she's like, hey, I think this animal would be best with you. And dude, that was new
Wow.
bloodline for me. And that animal actually produced for me. And the rest is history. So I have several different bloodlines out there of coneheads. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it was cool.
And it like that's it it kind of has to go that way, right?
Yeah,
Like you took an interest in it, great. And it it just worked out that one time.
yeah,
And then but dude, we have all heard tons of stories of species that it's like, "Oh yeah, this guy got it the one time and then never again."
yeah,
Like it's just so rare for you to you see it like, "Oh, that's cool, man. I got to get that someday." And then when you do, and then it worked. Okay.
yeah,
And then you're going to get all the Facebook geniuses and you're going to have the one off whatever, like we'll see what happens next year, kid. And
yeah,
then oh man, it's been like 5 years. I'm pretty sure it's cool. Like,
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's it's really rare, And
yeah,
that is people are always like, "Oh, I wish there was more diversity in the hobby. I wish there were more species." And it's like, "Yes, I agree, but you have to have someone like yourself who will do it. And then you also have to have at least a little bit of luck in the start and then the persistence to continue it. And to have the wherewithal to know that you probably should have multiple bloodlines, like you should have some buddies
yeah,
who keep some assurance colonies, and it takes a network. Like you if you didn't have any buddies that you could trust with that, or you just made 60, sold 60, made your money and cash out, then they're gone into the ether again.
yeah.
It takes that network and a plan.
No, definitely. And you want that species in other people's hands. You want that species out there. And I'm not saying that particular species, but I'm saying, in general, these rarer species, these species are not common. You want them in multiple people's hands. You don't want them in just one person's hands. Um, and so that way, because you never know what could happen. Like something terrible could happen to my collection and that species is gone, and you never know when it might come back into the country.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I
so
mean, look at
yeah,
Texas. There's bunches of people there where it turns out it got cold one year and everything froze. Like, I
yeah, that was
mean,
that was
that,
bad.
and that has never in a million years, that's not a thing. We keep our stuff outdoors, we're a drier version of Florida and all kinds of venomous and stuff. And, and then it happened.
Yep.
So if you had a bunch of super weird rattlesnakes or all kinds of crazy things, they're gone.
Yeah.
Unless you had buddies and, assurance colonies and things like that, um,
Yeah.
it
And
becomes
I'll
a
give
really big
you
deal.
yeah, and I'll give you a perfect example what you're saying with my cone heads. So with this new property, I keep obviously I've been keeping my animals outside for years.
Sure.
So my conehead colony actually got ravaged by raccoons. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, I didn't. So I had a cage that I just purchased, and I was fixing it up, and I was in the process of fixing it up. Well, in that process, the raccoons figured out what was in there, and actually took a lot of my cone heads, like devastated my whole breeding group of that species, to the point where
Oh,
I couldn't.
geez.
There'd be no way I could recover from it. But because I sent out babies to other breeders, I was able to get. So I had a lone female survive, and again, luckily, So Ron and Heather, they had some of my stock, and they had an extra male that they lent me. So now I have a male with me to hopefully keep me in that focus of trying to make that species continue. But
Wow.
if that not happened, that species, I don't know when would they come back into the country. It
Right.
took me since 2017 to make sure that multiple people have them, and
Right.
then they'd be gone, because I sent them out to several people. Just so happens that Ron and Heather are literally 20 minutes down the road from me, and I was,
Oh,
I
okay.
was really, I was really embarrassed to actually even share the story to them, but it really bothered me. It's one of those things that happens, and you're just like, you know what, I'm done. I'm gonna get rid of everything. Like that happens
Yeah,
to me.
it's
There's many things happen to me where I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of this, and then someone needs to like kick your head into gear. Like, no, you got to stay focused. And
yeah.
that was one of the situations that worked out for me. But still, it still was terrible that it happened. But still,
Oh,
and that,
yeah,
again,
absolutely.
that's the importance of the insurance colonies.
Yeah. Well, and that's a little more old school way of doing things. So like
Yeah,
Ryan McVeigh's a buddy of mine, and his way of saying it is, if the animals weren't worth anything, what would I keep? And that's
yeah,
kind of how he picks stuff. And so he has some rare stuff and some not rare stuff. He just has a scatter shot of things, but it's stuff that he likes. And if it wasn't worth anything, would I keep it? And then it's kind of the same way, like with me and my friend group. Like we kind of pass animals around a little bit,
yeah,
and nobody really cares about price point, right? It's like, some of my buddies have these and I have one of those, and we just kind of pass things around. But that's a way more old school way of doing stuff, like old school herpetoculture, a bunch of nerds in a Waffle House parking lot trading king snakes and stuff. Because like, some of the things that you're talking about, the more eclectic species and stuff, do have a lot higher price point.
yeah,
And you have to have that like buddy culture of, hey man, you're really good at this. You're one of my buddies. I think you should try these out. Like, we'll square up on money later, or give me a gecko or
yeah.
something. Like, I don't
Yep,
care. You,
absolutely.
you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So that, and then you got buddies on the back end that are like, oh, hey, I heard something happen. The cage broke or whatever. I got a mail. It's cool. Like, just come over to the house. No big deal.
yeah,
It happens in really small pockets in herpetoculture, and I don't know. I hope that attitude continues to be more prevalent, I guess.
yeah,
Um, yeah, like Eric said, there's a time and a place for selling and a time and a place for giving. And yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I agree. But it also is
Was that
keepers
Eric
that have
Haycraft?
yeah.
He's somebody that needs coneheads. He needs them.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
he's
when you
somebody
look
that
at his
he's
collection,
yeah, no, he's somebody that I actually want. I need him to get them. He needs to get them. So
yeah,
be it for
it
me or
makes
for
sense.
someone else, he's gonna get them.
There you go, Eric. Call up Ron, tell him that Eddie said so. It'll be all
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But no, that's that recognition, right? Like you see the
yeah,
guy, you see the work that he's doing, and the general species and the type, it all kind of jives and makes sense. And it's one of those things where it's like, hey man, you would crush those. Like, let me try to find a way to help make that happen, because you are a person who could further the species. It's not just a hookup for your buddies. It's that you recognize that someone has a skill set and has these abilities. And yeah, man,
yeah,
that's the only way you're
yeah,
going to keep it going.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So you got one weirdo set of lizards,
Yep.
and then you also have posted quite a few things about your helmeted iguanas.
Yes.
So what's going on with those? How is that? Because that's another
So
kind of off the
yeah,
wall one.
it's I like those. They're like my pet rocks. I call them my pet rocks because they kind of don't do much. But I started keeping those. The first time I kept those were the Hernandez or Hernandez. I'm terrible. I keep these rare animals, but I'm terrible with Latin names. Um, the Hernandez, the weird one. Eric knows what I'm talking about.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
He's probably
And
yelling at his computer right now, but that's
yeah,
fine.
he's yelling. Um, I got those. I kept them. They were doing well. Did again? No one had them before. I didn't have Eric to go to. I was the only person I knew who had them, and this was probably 2013, maybe 2015. And again, another one of those situations where I'm Googling and I'm looking, and the only people who has information are like Germany, places that I don't know what they're saying. So I kind of played it by ear, and they did well, but were egg bound, and they pretty much just failed on me. So luckily, the cristatus came into import. I got a pretty much a big group of those.
Okay.
And they've been doing pretty well. No breeding yet, but they're doing well.
Awesome.
But I really enjoy the cryptic look to them, and just everything about them I enjoy. So, and again, I'm a sucker for that stuff that people, if I can't pronounce the Latin name and it doesn't have a common name, more than likely I want it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how my collection works. So I have them. I made sure I had a good group of them. I was actually able to pick what I needed. So that way I can have some success, whether they breed or not. Like, obviously I hope they breed, but
sure,
you know, I just enjoy having them, and they're doing pretty well now. But again, it took me kind of trial and error to kind of keep that species alive.
Okay. What struggles did you have in regards to those?
So when I had kept them before, literally I didn't know anybody who had them, and I couldn't find anybody who had them. So I was just going based off of I was looking at Apple Maps and Apple like the weather apps, and looking at the temperatures and where they come from. And at first I was blasting them with too much light, and then I realized, you know, they're not a light animal. They're kind of a forest animal. They want some light, but they kind of want to keep it low. So that was my big problem at first. And then I'm kind of thinking that if I give them a lay box, they'll lay, and that's not how all things work. Ideally, you have a lay box, they lay, you take eggs, life is great. That's not what they wanted. They want it more of like a leaf litter setup where they can go in, they can dig, they can be a little bit more cryptic. If you see them, they kind of freak out and they stop laying. And so that was one thing that I learned from them.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had one female that did lay. They were infertile, but she did lay. And part that she picked, again, this was probably 6 years ago. She laid in like a corner, but she covered it with leaf litter. You couldn't see even dirt. And I had no idea. I was just, you know, I was learning as I was watching them, you know, do their process. And then when I dug them up, they were all duds from the get-go. So, but I did learn from that, though. Sure.
And then Eric asks, are you keeping cristatus outside?
100%. 100%. Yeah. That they do really well outside.
Okay.
Yeah, especially during the rain.
Really?
Yeah, I keep them very covered, so the light hits it in like just like if you're under a tree and the light kind of beams in through little pinpoints. That's pretty much how I keep them, and that's kind of how they seem to enjoy it. They don't want the light beaming on them, and if they do, it's in the morning. It's not that intense, and then they're kind of hidden after that.
Okay.
So I have several groups of them outside, and you see them slowly move to more of like a covered area.
Okay.
Always on tree trunks. They're always on trunks. They're never, you know, out in basking position. They're holding on to a trunk, and they're kind of just sitting there, hoping you don't see them, hoping, you know, nothing comes by, and they just kind of move their body slowly to, like, if the sun's there, they'll kind of move to the other side. So they're kind of a weird animal to follow, at least in my experience. Yeah.
And then Eric says, without rain, how do you hydrate?
So I am outside every single day, and I spray everything down. I do have a sprinkler system that also hits everything.
Okay.
So I don't have to, I'm lucky. So the sprinkler system kind of takes care of everything for me. But once the rain season comes, I don't really do much.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I was very fortunate. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I'm very fortunate to that we picked a house that just coincidentally met all our needs. Selfishly met my needs without really knowing it. No,
Sure.
it's it's my wife's pretty much her dream house. It's everything that she ever wanted, and then little by little, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, holy crap! Like, there's the person before is growing a thing of papayas. I got like 6 papaya trees. I have mango trees. I have banana trees. I have a sprinkler system. It's like this
Right.
man knew that he was going to sell a house to a guy who was breeding tortoises and lizards, and so it's just perfect. So the sprinkler system hits the cages perfectly, and we
Cool.
can time them. But if not, I spray everything down. But once the rainy season comes, that will be not. It won't be needed.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I know it was a negative before you were talking about egg bound, but you were talking about
Yeah.
eggs there. You had an Aussie water dragon you posted
Yes.
being gravid.
Yeah.
How are those? So I babysat a pair of those for a little bit, and those are a cool lizard, man.
Yeah.
They're fun.
So it's a species that I never thought that I would actually keep. And again, you go through these situations where there's an opportunity and you're a fool if you don't take the opportunity. So when you have an opportunity to purchase a group of babies, you take that opportunity, whether it be trade or you pay, however it works. The cool thing is when you're in the know and you have the connections, you can your animals that you produce is currency to purchase other animals. So I acquired, a small group of Australian water dragons, and it's a 2.2, which worked out perfectly. And that is actually one of the few animals. Actually, it's one of 2 animals that I can keep outside all year round with zero effort, other than feeding and watering. But winter, they're outside. It's 50 degrees. They're basking. They still want food. Doesn't matter. It's 90 degrees.
Wow.
They're outside. They do not care. So that's one of the easiest animals I have. The downside is, since I keep them outside, they're not the tamest. So
Sure.
I come outside and they run and they hide and they bash themselves. But one of the most rewarding animals I keep, because I watch them from pretty much a hatchling until what they are now. Male's breeding. He's bright red underneath, giant head, distinct black markings on face. Female's not so much, but the male is very impressive. And I've witnessed a lot of breeding. And then just little by little, when you keep animals outside, there is a challenge to it. I know you like to bash the people who keep animals outside, and I have
jealousy.
Some,
it's just jealousy.
I have some exception to that, because it's actually harder outside than it is inside. The only animal that I keep outside that the only animal that I keep outside that I literally do not have to care for are my Chinese box turtles. That's an animal that I don't have to really do anything with. Other than that, everything else is kind of a challenge. Again, if it's not raining, you got to deal with it. Predators, you got to deal with it. Too much heat, too much sun, too cold, you got to deal with it. That's something that, out of a flip of a dime, you have to act, and you have to go outside and you have to deal with the situation. Being outside, I have to do a lot of maintenance checks. 100%. If you don't do maintenance checks on your animals visually every day, you're going to fail. And then every week, I'll actually grab the animals and observe them. And with the Australian water dragons, I grab them and I'm like, wow, one of these is pretty big. Like, she looks huge. So I'm looking at her and kind of see some bulges, and I'm like, wow, she's gravid, like 100%. Because the male's not this big, and it doesn't look like he has jelly beans in his stomach. And right now she's in the lay box, she's kind of moving around in the lay box that I gave her. So that's something that I'm very excited for. It'll be my first time breeding them. Hopefully having success with them. But yeah, that's again another animal that I didn't think I'd be able to work with, that hopefully I can, have more of.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the thing about keeping outside is, for people who can't do it, it sounds perfect, right?
Yeah.
And then what I have noticed is, for folks that keep outside, so I keep almost everything indoors. What I am trying to do is get the happy medium in my enclosure, right? And
Yeah.
I use equipment and lights and all the things. And it seems to me that folks like yourself who keep so many things outdoors, you have the happy medium, right? Which is the part I'm jealous of. But then what you are trying to do is mitigate all the extremes. So like I only have the extremes if I make a mistake. You know, if I
Yeah.
put the heat lamp in the wrong place or if I did something wrong,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
And another
you just
thing,
get to
so
live in the awesome environment and then it just
right.
happens to you. And then you
Yeah.
you can't control it, so you're forced to react.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we first moved in this property, it's funny because while my wife and the rest of the family are packing and they're deciding where things are going to go, I'm outside looking at the sun. Okay, where is the sun hitting in this particular spot? Where's the sun? Where's the sun at this time of day? And where can I put this animal and this animal and this animal? And I don't want to cook the animal, so they need to be here. But the sun comes down in this area, and this tree blocks that section. So it is kind of a struggle. You don't want just random cages in random places, so you kind of want to make it to make sense. But yeah, that was a
Right.
challenge for me when I first moved here, because it was direct sunlight, just
Sure.
brutal. Yeah, and a lot of the animals I deal with are rainforest animals that I do keep outside, and they don't want beaming light on them. So for the first maybe 2 months, I struggled trying to find out the perfect
Right.
medium of where these animals are going to be placed. And so far, I've done okay. The first month or two, I did lose animals because um, it was just I couldn't find the proper place to put them outside, and they just didn't do well. Or I had gravid animals. I had actually several gravid animals at the time that during the process of moving from one place to another, they were just like, "Hey, screw this! I'm gonna go egg bound and not do anything." So that was another struggle of moving here.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean that the stress level.
yeah,
For
thankfully
sure.
I
Which I
I
mean, that
just now got it dialed in.
is to be expected, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. Well, and I think so like I'm messing around when I give people a hard time about that. But like what people in my position have this like romanticized notion that you live in Florida, so you have a great climate and different things like that, and it's great. But your backyard is not a cross section of Florida. Like it's still a
yeah,
backyard. Like and
right,
I just think people envision this like, well, of course your backyard looks exactly like the Everglades, so you could just screen off a portion and keep stuff. Like,
yeah,
no, that's not.
no, no, not
You
exactly.
may have a generalized good climate, but you still have to account for any number of things. Like you were saying, just the placement in your yard of tree cover and overhead
Yeah,
light and things like that. It's not just you walked out into the swamps of the Everglades off your back porch. Like that's not,
yeah,
people just have
and
kind of
you,
this misidentification of it, I guess.
yeah, and you don't want to get me started on a winter here. I mean, winter is laughable to people like you, but um, for my animals, it's not laughable. That's a very
Right.
stressful time because you keep these animals outside. Hopefully, you
Sure.
keep them outside for 10 months out of the year, but those other 2 months, it's a struggle, it's a pain. You bring them inside, they're confused, like why am I inside? Why? And you give them artificial lighting and heat, and they're just kind of all thrown off. And sometimes they do well, sometimes they're just like they not that they don't do well, but they kind of it takes some time to adjust. And then you're just
Yeah, I'm sure it's
hoping
stressful.
that and then you're just hoping it gets warmer again because you bring them indoors, but that humidity level is not the same as it is outside. And so winter for me is very, very stressful, and I'm always checking the weather to make sure, like, oh, is it in the 70s? Okay, cool. And then this year was kind of weird where it was like it started to warm up. We were in the 90s, and then the next day was in the 50s, and that happened for like on and
Right.
off for like 2 weeks here. And now we're good. Everything's back. Everything's dialed in. Everything's perfect. Everything's outside 24/7 again, the way I want it. So
Right.
very happy. Yeah.
So then, when you have to bring things inside, do you just have a ton of totes, or like how do you accommodate that?
So I do have. It depends on the animal. So like for instance, like the monitors, they have a heated little shelter that I just close them in. I just lock them in there. It's inside their enclosure, so they go in it, and they're smart. They're not dumb animals, so they instinctively go into it, and I just close it, and I turn the
Okay.
the heat element on. Same thing with
Okay.
the tortoises. They do the same thing. Because realistically, I can't bring in a bunch of herd of redfoots and the Eldabra. I can't do that inside my garage.
Right.
So they have a
Yeah.
heated area with the heating element. And then a lot of the screen cages that I do, a lot of them go in as is. And then a lot of the ones that do need a lot of humidity, they will go into glass tanks to
Okay.
hold that humidity in. Because screen cages are great outside in Florida.
Right. Right.
Screen cages are a death sentence if you're keeping them indoors and you're not maintaining that humidity. And that's something like something I cringe when people buy like the chameleon kits that are the screen
Yeah.
cage and they think or I'll have people who say, "Wow, Eddie keeps this outside. I'll keep it the same way but indoors," and they fail
Right.
because they're not keeping up with that humidity. So the humidity and keeping heat indoors in a garage, that's the challenge.
Sure.
But this year was easier for me. Again, the new property that I'm at, the house and the garage are two separate buildings. So
Oh, okay.
the garage, so the garage is pretty much something that's kind of mine, and I can do what I for now. I don't know how long that will last, but for now, I can do kind of what I want in there. So it was easier for me to go out there with a hose, and I have a hose connected in there, and I can kind of spray what I need to spray and
Okay. Yeah.
not worry about it. But yeah, that is the challenge of that whole transition into inside of poor weather, and then also hurricanes, things like for hurricanes.
Sure.
They don't go back into their cage inside the garage. They will go into bags and they will get boxed up, and they're secured just in case
Okay.
the worst happens. The monitors will get bagged
Right.
up. Tortoises get bagged up because you never know.
Of course.
And with my
Yeah.
license, I have the disaster plan, and I'm kind of required to do that as well. So
Okay.
that's stressful.
So
Real stressful, actually.
yeah, I get that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It that is actually something that I try to explain that to folks that again, like, oh, keep them outside, this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah, but that's every part of being outside, and that's actually a big thing for my wife is I've had the opportunity to take jobs in the Southeast, and that's like her massive fear. She's spent her whole life in the Midwest, and her big thing is I don't want to go somewhere where there could be a hurricane. Um, and it's one of those like, well, a lot of times, folks get quite a bit of advance notice for major storms and
Yes.
things, and
Yeah.
it's cultural in the American Southeast to prepare for storms, and there's a process folks go through.
Yes. It's very
Um,
cultural, and sometimes you throw a party and
right,
you just sit back and you ignore it and you enjoy it, and your internet connections, it stays the same and you're great. And then other times you're like, oh, this actually might be something serious.
right,
So sometimes, for the most part, luckily, we've been kind of lucky. Um, we kind of enjoy the hurricane without much disaster, but then, you know, there's other times where I have to really take it seriously and either disassemble cages and definitely kind of lock down some animals. And then that's not counting
right.
taking care of my family and making sure everything's good inside the house and the family as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
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 So we had a question. It was scrolled way back up there. Scott Iper's in the chat, just making fun of all of us because Australian water dragons chill out in his backyard because
I
he's
know.
Australian. So that's not cool.
It makes me laugh that we value these things so rare, and a lot of them over there, they're just like, really, this thing in my yard? Okay.
Oh, that's okay. He would think a corn
Yeah.
snake was cool. So,
Yeah. Green and Knoll will blow their mind.
rarity is relative.
Yeah.
But no, Jessica asked earlier, you mentioned your wife. Is she also in the hobby or just you?
Just me.
Just you. Okay.
Yeah, just me. They tolerate it. Um, they're supportive, and my children have been kind of desensitized to it. So to them,
Okay.
it's just, it's not terrible, but it's not like a big deal. So like I can
Right.
show them an egg hatching, something hatching from an egg, and they're like, oh, cool, it's Friday. So, it's normal. I'll show them animals. They're like, hey, look, I'm probably the only one who's done this. And they're just like, oh, that's cool. When's
Right.
dinner? Yeah.
Yeah.
But then like if they have their friends over, which couple years ago, they had like, there were some friends over in our old house, and the kid was just like memorized and just kind of stopped in their track and just staring at like a turtle. And my kids were just like, really? It's just a turtle. Let's play.
Yep.
So they're kind of desensitized to it, but
Yep.
every now and then they'll help me out. I took one of my daughters to help me out at a show.
That's cool.
But yeah, it's pretty much just me.
Okay. Yeah, my kids, they're into it in kind of their own stuff. But yeah, you definitely get like we'll be having discussions or something at out at school stuff, and we're talking about like what we're doing at home or whatever. And my kids will ask me something. I'm like, I don't know. I had to build something for the tortoises, so I was busy or what have you. And then, their friends are like, oh yeah, what were you guys doing? Like, what do you do at your house? And it's like, oh, my dad was doing some stupid turtle thing or whatever. And like, that's not weird to them, and they just don't put together that like, yeah, not everybody's dad is like messing around with gators and stuff. Like, it's not,
No, that's 100% me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I have my Aldabra. So like every 4th of July, I have one of my daughters hold the Aldabra to show like the growth. And I mean, the first time I did, I was like, it was almost like I would force her to take the picture. Like, come on, someone would kill to hold this thing and take this picture.
Yeah. You don't get how cool this is. Like I'm telling you, this is cool. Yeah.
And me even having the Aldabra is actually a funny story. So like every year for Christmas, so I've been with my wife for almost like 17 years now. So
awesome.
Every year it was like, what do you get? What do we get each other? So I would always say something outlandish. Right. So for me, something outlandish was, I want an Aldabra tortoise, but that was a joke. It was never like, I never expected to get it. So every year,
I really hope my wife is listening to this episode.
Anyway. Tell her, yeah. So every year it's like, what do you want for Christmas? It's like, I want an Aldabra. You laugh and then you get something else, which,
sure.
Great. I'm not expecting. And then one year she's like, listen, fine. She's like, shut up. Just get your Aldabra. I was like, are you serious? She's like, just stop mentioning this. I was like, are you dead serious? She's like, you can have the Aldabra, but I know nothing of this reptile world. So you have to find the person. You have to do all, and for me, that's nothing. So
right, yeah,
it was done. It was the moment she said yes, it was already done.
Yeah.
So again, that's an animal that it's like if I could just have the one animal, it'd probably be my Aldabra.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's so I'm fortunate that my wife is actually really into it, but it's for like, friends and family and stuff that are outside of it or not heavily involved. And, and you get yeah, man, I guess like, sure. Cause like that was when I was growing up, when I was a kid, I would tell my parents or, grandparents or what have you, like, oh, this is what I want for Christmas or whatever. And they're like, okay, well, I'll get it as your gift, but I don't know. Like, I don't know how to do that, or where to go. And it's like, oh no, I was already calling the guy. Like, it's cool. If you're in this world, I know where to go. Don't worry.
Yeah. And if you don't know the guy, a guy who knows that guy.
Oh yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. Especially for bucket list species. I know the direction. Yeah.
Yeah. We live in a weird industry where, no matter what animal it is, there's a guy out there.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's legal or not legal, there's somebody.
For sure.
Keep it on the legal side, but you can definitely get whatever you need.
Yeah. Well, and that's Scott here in the chat was saying that his 5-year-old was lying too much at school, and he told the teacher he had a pet crocodile, so they had to bring one in for show and tell and prove that. I've actually been in that exact same boat. But mine had to do with combatives and other stuff so my kids went to school and told their teacher that their mom and dad were fighting in the living room.
Yeah.
And then he drew a picture of it. They asked my son, oh, what'd you guys do as a family last night? You had dinner and this, that, and the other. And my son told the teacher that we were fighting and drew a picture of it. And so I had to, like Scott was saying, I had to actually give the example. It's like, no, you don't understand. There's a bunch of boxing equipment. I'll bring you a picture. Oh no. But yeah. If you're not in the world, it can sound very outlandish.
Yeah. And kids can be brutally honest without even realizing what they're saying.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you asked him and he answered you. You know,
Yeah.
Scott's thing the same way. Like you asked and they were like, "Oh, my dad has a crocodile." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, kid." And it's like,
Yeah.
"Well,
Whatever.
His dad's Scott Eiper." Like, "No, he has one."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Um
100%.
so on to the lizards since it's a lizard podcast. Um Yellow spotted night lizards. I saw you post this.
Yep.
I thought it was super cool. Um I have only ever interacted with them a couple of times and I think they're awesome. What is that like? How is that going?
So
That's
it's an animal that I know nothing about. And obviously I researched it, but it was an animal that I had an opportunity to work with. And I'm in this mode now that if I have the opportunity to work with it, um, and I can have access to multiples, and I'll take that opportunity because again, you never know when these animals are just gone and you can't get them anymore.
yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of where I'm at now. So again, whatever animal's out there, and I just think it might not show up anymore, I'll get it. So that's an animal I've always wanted. So I have them. I have probably 5 or 6 of them, and they're really, they're very. I don't even know how to explain it. They're very cryptic. They'll come out, but they don't want to be handled. They have a nasty bite for something so small.
So I saw
But
you post that. That surprised me
yeah,
because they're not big, you know,
no,
or
they're not big. No,
relatively speaking.
like 5, 6 inches.
Yeah.
But if you look at the jaw, the bottom jaw part, it's actually
Hmm.
pretty thick for the body. So what they do is they'll actually, if you get too close or you handle them, they'll actually turn around and they'll bite, and they like it's okay. They won't let go. Again, I'm only speaking from my experience. That I've literally just been keeping these for probably 4 months now. So I'm going by
Okay.
what I'm witnessing. But
Sure.
the individuals, the adults that I have, they don't like it and they bite and they don't let go. Um, but
Wow.
other than that, I do have them in small groups. I keep twos together. I read
Okay.
a while back that they can be kind of aggressive towards each other. I haven't really witnessed that at all.
Okay.
But again, I have them kind of in a spaced out. I keep them in tub systems. So I guess like what people would keep like a ball python in, an adult ball
Sure.
python. That's what I have them in. Obviously, um, like the soil and cork bark and sphagnum and all decked out, and they're doing great, eating very well. Hopefully they'll just produce because I really have never experienced like live birth with reptiles, so that'd be cool. Just one day opening up and the little
Yeah.
babies running around. But
Absolutely.
again, that's an animal that I'm still learning about, and so far I'm doing well. Um, they're getting bigger. I'm weighing them, and I wish I could tell you more. I really do. It's just again, I literally just got them, and
Yeah. No,
that
that's why I wanted to ask. I thought they were
yeah,
super cool and
and that
I
one
saw
day,
you
and
post about it.
the day that I took that picture, I was filling up their food bowl and just kind of spraying them down, and the one came out and was just kind of seeing what I was doing, and I was just like, oh, cool, I'll take a picture, and I posted it, and then I didn't. I had so many people like messaging me about them, and I was like, man, I really wish I could tell you more, but I don't really. This is what I'm doing, and it's working, but I don't
Right.
really know,
Yeah.
So,
I
but
mean,
yeah,
that's all you can do. You know,
yeah,
like
yeah,
this is working out for me. Best of luck. You
yeah,
know.
and luckily I had other breeders like they see the picture and they kind of make a comment like, oh, I kept these 20 years ago. So then you separately private message that person and get some more info. So I actually
Yeah,
got some
for
feedback
sure.
from I went out and got some feedback from some of those people,
Okay.
and yeah, so far what they're saying, I'm doing okay. So keep it humid, keep it moist, keep it dark.
Right.
Lots of logs, lots of cork bark, a lot of hiding places, and you'll have success. But again, a lot of them are saying that don't keep them in groups because they'll fight. So I'm only keeping twos together, and so far
Okay.
I'm okay. So, and I do have I have a bunch of babies as well that I didn't produce. I got, and they're raising up and they're doing well.
Cool. So quite a few of the species that we've been talking about going back and forth um are well, especially when you get, you know, helmetids, coneheads and things like that. They're smaller, seem to be a little more flighty. So it's Are you more of a I want to set it up and watch it do its own thing as opposed to wanting to play with stuff and hold things? Because it just seems like most of the stuff that you post and the things that you talk about online are it's behavior. Like you're watching the animal do this thing,
Yeah,
or the only times I've really seen you handle stuff is, moving babies, or if you had to
yeah,
move tortoises and things, then,
right, right, right.
you snap pictures during the movement or whatever, or hatching time. But most of your pictures and stuff are lizards and tortoises just doing what they
Doing
do,
their thing.
kind
Yeah,
of separate from you.
yeah.
So is that more of how you treat things?
It's funny because I never knew I did that until my wife would make fun of me because I would just stare at an animal doing nothing for like 30 minutes. And then it would like
Yep.
yawn. It would yawn or it would move. And I'd be like, oh my God, did you see that? And they're just looking at me like I'm crazy. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, you're right. I do keep a lot of animals that you really don't touch. They're like almost like fish tank animals. Like they're in their little setup and you kind of just watch
Sure.
them. And then, but watching your animals, you learn what they want, what they don't want. They can't talk, but obviously their body language tells you if something needs to be adjusted. So I'm always watching. But yeah, no, you're right. There's a lot of animals that I work with that you don't handle like a bearded dragon.
Right.
So there's very few animals that I actually have that you can. So
Right. Now, is that just you think that's probably what you enjoy more is watching behavior and seeing them do what they're supposed to do,
yeah, I
abs from
so
us?
so the fun part, just like keeping animals indoors, the fun part for me is putting an animal outside and doing my best to make sure that enclosure is close to what it would be like for them in the wild. So not only am I researching the animal itself, but I'm researching the country, I'm researching the city, I'm researching the plants, how
For sure.
much, how much light, how much this, how much that, and I adjust accordingly. So I try to have like a little ecosystem for each individual animal. And for me, that's
Yeah.
the fun part. And same thing with the indoor stuff because I do keep animals indoors as well.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so for me, that's the best part is trying to mimic what they do in the wild and how they have their life set up and just mimic it.
For sure. And that was kind of the thing, like, as I was so for people who are listening or for yourself who don't know, um, the first few episodes I did were obviously people I knew, and I cheated, so I interviewed guys that I knew. Um, and then after that, I've just kind of gone out into the ether of social media for lizards and stuff. But I honestly get feedback from other people, and so that is how I came to you. I didn't know you personally, but I
Right.
knew of Serpentera exotics and things. But that was actually how you were presented to me by other folks who keep, is that, oh, it's all these cool species, and it's all of the stuff that it's behavior. It's, oh man,
Yeah.
they're outside and they're weird species. They're a little more rare, but it's like, oh, his pictures are just them doing lizard stuff. Like they're just out there doing stuff. It's not a bunch of selfies of you with like a really expensive lizard or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
it was a bunch of eclectic species, and then they were outside and they were just doing lizard stuff.
Yep.
Is how that was presented to me, and I was like, yes, that's amazing,
Yeah.
awesome.
I never. So I actually have friends that I've met like through the reptile world, through Facebook, through Instagram, and they're like, "Hey, I've known you for years. I don't know what you look like." So
Yeah,
I had people private messaging me when I would post that I'm doing this podcast, and they're like, "Is it just audio or can we see you?" I'm like, "No, you'll see me," and they're like, "Wow, a big face reveal," because I'm actually very camera shy. If you meet me in person and people who know me, they that's probably weird to them because I'm kind of out there sometimes. But to the people on Facebook and Instagram that have never seen me, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be seen. So like
sure.
today at the Reptile Show, the news the news channel came and they wanted to interview me for some animals that I had, and
Wow.
and I was like, listen, I'll do it, but it's got to be audio. I don't want to be seen at all. And they looked at me and they're just like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm gonna freeze. I just don't want to do it.
Sure.
And they're just like, but you're, and they insulted the reptile world and, kind of complimented me. They're like, you're kind of like the normal looking one here. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
I
I'm
get
like,
it.
I appreciate that, but I'm going to decline. So they did some B-roll footage. I had some bearded dragons and they wanted to talk about bearded dragons. So they did B-roll footage of the dragons while talking to me about them as a pet. So you just hear my
Sure.
voice and then you're looking at dragons do what dragons do.
Yeah,
Which was nothing.
for sure.
So
Well,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So everyone who keeps asking me, here you go. Here's the face reveal. And yeah.
But I mean, that's where your interests lie. That's one of the cool things about social media, I think, is you literally can scroll through somebody's Instagram and get a general feel for that.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of action shots. It's a bunch of short little videos of their animals doing things, or it's all babies and breeding, or it's 50 selfies with a ball python. You can really get a sense of those things. And when folks started talking to me about different ideas for episodes that I could do, and I was scrolling through like that, it just became really obvious, like very quickly. It was because it's 2021 and social media is a thing. Like it was a little different that like there just aren't any selfies. Like you would think that everyone does that. And it's like, no, man, just a ton of tortoises. Like,
I've had people come, they bump into me at reptile shows and they see me and they're like, hey, you're from Serpentera. I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, I thought you'd be older, or I thought you this. I thought I envisioned you differently. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, just me. I don't know what to tell you.
Yep.
But yeah, no, you're right. I do post a lot of like if I see an animal doing a weird behavior or just doing something that I think is cool, I'm gonna either shoot a video of it or just post a picture of it. And, like I did a short video of I also keep like the green keeled lizards or Gastrophilus prasinus.
Yeah, for sure.
I keep those outside as well. And my male is very like he hates me. He absolutely hates me. He does not
those
like
pictures
me.
are awesome.
Yeah. So I posted like a video of him, like, because I keep them a little weird. So they're in like a Reptibreeze type situation, and their nest box is a parakeet nest box that you would get at any bird store. And I fill it with cork. Yeah, it's filled with cork flats and sphagnum.
Okay.
So that way, when they lay their eggs, because they're egg gluers, so they glue their eggs onto objects. So when they lay their eggs in between the cork flats, I can just take the cork and just put it in a Tupperware in my incubator, rather than getting them stuck onto something.
That's awesome.
So every week I would open the top of the parakeet nest box and I would lift open and grab each individual cork piece. And then the male would immediately just burst up, stand on his two back legs and stick his tongue out and just stare at me. And then just sit there. The female would bolt, but the male was like, what are you doing? And so I was like, man, I gotta, take a quick clip of this. So I did it, and it went actually a little viral on me. It was kind of weird. I didn't think it was something that crazy, but they're a very weird species.
It's still not often kept. And they are very interactive for as small as they are. That when you get those individuals that are not scared of you, they really aren't scared of you, and that's pretty unique for a lot of people.
Yeah. He does not back down.
Eric would like to make a cash offer for the lizards behind you, is his most recent comment.
Yeah. So all of that stuff there, that's kind of like what got me started into reptiles. I was really into like Godzilla. And obviously I couldn't have a real Godzilla. So I was always fascinated since I was a little kid. So I have, all these, if you go to a reptile show and you see me, I'll have a giant Godzilla statue with me at the show.
That's awesome.
So if it really wasn't for like the Godzilla stuff, like, if it wasn't for, where's the camera at? This guy, I wouldn't be keeping reptiles.
For sure.
So I was never into dinosaurs ever, especially since I never agreed that dinosaurs look the way that we think they do. So I was never into like collecting dinosaur statues. So, Godzilla's not real, so he could look however you want it to look. So
Right.
yeah, like I said, yeah, I have way more of Godzilla stuff than this. This is just a background that I made real quick for this show.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
So on another lizard that is, or it, I don't know, I've not personally kept them, but from what I've been told is more of a look, don't touch. You also were posting about the monkey anoles,
Yeah, yeah,
and I I know that I had seen them on some lists that just recently came in, but I, other than yourself and maybe one or two other people, I have not seen anyone keeping them at all.
yeah.
Um, and they just seem, again, I mean, I've never kept them, but they just seem way different. I mean, are you keeping it just like a regular old anole, or is it kind of its own weird thing? They just look very different.
Yeah, so genetically, they're their own thing. That
Right.
that whole genus is its own thing. They're not
Yeah.
anoles. The name, I hate the name because they're not anoles.
Right.
They're their own thing. But you know, you say monkey anole, everyone knows what you're talking about. And since I am terrible with Latin names, the monkey anole. But yeah, that was another situation of knowing people. And I had a friend who did some importation, and he had the opportunity to literally get these animals straight from South America and straight into my hands literally within days. And so they weren't sitting in a
Whoa.
third party. They weren't switching hands basically. They weren't going to like a wholesaler. They weren't going to like four different, because the thing is most of these things that are imported, they go to like 5 different places, not just people, but they go to 5 different places before
Right.
they're at their final destination.
Yeah.
But no, literally they were opened in a box, and then my friend drove to my house right after he opened them and was like, "Hey, you pick what you want." And I was like, "Okay." So
Wow.
I had free range of what I wanted, and so my even out of the box they looked great. They literally looked like they were in South America like the day before. So I didn't get any emaciated looking animals. They
Wow.
all looked great. They all looked great. So they're thriving for me. They're doing well. They're doing a lot of nothing for me right now, but you know, so far it's almost 5 months that I've had them and outdoors. Doing great. Right now, they just
That's
started
cool.
accepting hornworms for me. Um, but yeah, I keep them in a screen cage situation. I have two groups of 1.2, um,
Okay.
and I keep them in a heavily planted type of situation in a Reptibreeze. Multiple, you know, microclimates. Even though I keep animals in Reptibreezes, every setup has like a bunch of microclimates where they can kind of choose where they want to go. And
Okay.
for at least what I'm keeping, they prefer to be at the very top, right where there's sun. So that's kind of how they've been, and they've
Really?
just been doing really well for me. Yeah, I don't really handle them
Wow.
too much because I kind of just want them. They're still at that stage where I kind of view them as like fragile.
Right.
Um,
Sure.
and then once I keep them for a while, then I'll be like, this is just that animal. Let me just grab it and show the world. Um, but for right now, they're doing really well. I'm not messing too much. Super hydrated, eating well, and hopefully I can breed them. The incubation takes forever on these guys, so we'll see.
I did read that. It was
Yeah,
pretty weird.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine through Instagram, and again, I'm terrible with names. I'm gonna forget who he is. I believe his name is Arthur. If I get that wrong, he can message me and tell me to, you know, go somewhere. But he actually has that species that he has captive bred and successfully gotten eggs, not wild caught, grabbed, but he actually has kept them. They have bred. He has gotten eggs, and they look great. And he's just doing the long waiting game of seeing them hatch out.
Right.
So yeah, I actually kind of messaged him for some info on how to take care of them properly. And yeah, so far I'm doing okay. So we'll see how that goes. But again, that's another species that I never thought I'd have. You know, you see it in magazines or you see it in little descriptions. And kind of you just hope one day that you have it.
For
Now I got
sure.
6 of them. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I got 6 of them.
Yeah, and I got 6 of them. I had the opportunity to get more, but I stayed with the 6.
For sure.
I didn't know how they would do, so I kept it. If I knew they would have done this well, I would have bought the whole.
Right.
It was probably like
Yeah.
20. It was probably 20 animals that I got to pick through, and I
Wow.
probably would have kept. If I knew they were going to do this well, I would have kept all 20, honestly. Because that's again back to what I was saying about the Coneheads. That's a species that you never know when it will come back into captivity.
Right.
So if you can actually breed those and actually have them in other people's hands and get that species established in captivity, then you don't have an animal that might disappear.
Right.
So that's kind of like what my goal is with some of that rarer stuff.
And then Eric said, you need to do well because that is another species he's also interested in.
And that's another species he would do well with. In fact, a lot of people would comment to me for the Coneheads, and they would say, "Hey, those coneheads look very familiar to, the monkey anoles." And I was like, "Really?" So let me do some research. Oh, they kind of have a similar look. I get what they're
Sure.
saying, and that's kind of what caught my eye. And then again, I have a friend who does a lot of importation, and he was like, anything that's kind of weird that kind of pops up that he knows that I'm interested in, he'll just send me a list, and he'll say, "What do you think you want?" And
right.
most of the time I kind of ignore it because I don't want to really do too much wild caught stuff anymore. And sometimes I get my hands full. Or he'll send me like a whole list of like frogs, and I'm like, I'm not into frogs.
Right.
So those popped up, and he's like, "Hey, Eddie, you have to get these." And I was like, "Okay, let's see what this is gonna happen."
Good to have buddies.
Yeah. Buddies that look.
I don't know, man. With this interview, it sounds like Eric needs to build himself a trade list because that's about the third thing he's said he needs out of your collection.
Well,
I didn't see any offers come through on those Facebook messages yet.
Eric needs to fly down to Florida and build me enclosures because I don't know how to build anything, and he needs to build all this stuff for me, and then we'll work some trading stuff out.
I could see that. He definitely excels in that area for sure.
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to ask that. With keeping stuff outside, so you've talked about reptibreezes and stuff a few times. Do you find yourself just purchasing more art enclosures as opposed to making your own and just kind of trying to go about it that way, or how do you?
I would have a lot more money. I would have a lot more money if I knew how to build things. So I do buy a lot of cages. So the screen cages I keep are not Reptibreeze. I say Reptibreeze because you say Reptibreeze and everyone knows what you're talking about. The cages I keep they're called DIY cages, and they're more resistant to rust.
Yeah.
They look like a Reptibreeze, but they're silver and they're nicer. They're sturdier. Everything about them is better. They're a little bit pricier, but they do the job. I do a lot of purchasing cages, and then if I have friends that are getting rid of cages or throwing away cages, I'll take them and kind of jerry rig them and make them look good or decent to the best of my abilities. And most of it's things that I purchase myself, or I'll purchase things for like rabbits or something, and I'll kind of mimic it and make it set up to look more naturalistic for reptiles. So I have a lot of cages that are for bigger animals, like bigger mammals that you would never know they're for mammals. They think that I custom made it, so it's kind of a compliment. The only cage I've ever really built was for the white throats, and again that I kind of just mimicked what I saw at Ron's and kind of made it a little bit smaller. And since I'm not handy, that probably took me a month to build, which should have took me a couple days. But again, I'm not handy. So it's probably like my biggest accomplishment of building a cage. So yeah. And then with the tortoises, it's literally just putting boards and, little supports. And so that's the easy part, the tortoises. So.
Right. Yeah, it's I'm not gonna lie, man. I'm a little bit jealous that you just kind of casually threw it out there. You're like, yeah, I just try to mimic Ron's. Like, I've been in Ron's backyard. Like that was.
Yeah, I've been very.
That's a pretty good. That's a pretty good example to have.
I've been very fortunate, like as far as having a friendship with Ron and Heather. They take good care of me, and I have like I said, not even animal related. I have a very good friendship with both of them. So I value that a lot, and
that's cool.
I'll go and I'll see what he'll do, and sometimes I'll mimic it on my own, or think I can make it a little bit better maybe. Very rarely that happens, but yeah, I take ideas. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So I don't particularly care that it's a lizard podcast. You have mentioned tortoises a number of times. I am also a turtle and tortoise nerd.
Yeah.
So what do you have for shelled creatures? Because I've seen quite a few pictures of that too.
Yeah, so I have a herd of redfoots, and then I have some cherry heads. Um, I have just a lone big leopard female, and then my Aldabra. So nothing too crazy. And then I have my separately, I have like 6 or 7 Chinese box turtles, adults.
Awesome.
I think that's about it. And I have like probably 2 Florida box turtles as well.
Okay. Very
Yeah,
cool.
and I do have kind of like a partnership with somebody who does the Burmese black or Burmese brown mountain tortoises.
Oh, cool.
Emmys. That's a really cool species. So yeah,
Yeah.
I dwell in tortoises because out of enjoyment, not profit, because you're not going to make a lot of money wasting, spending years and years and years. So I
Yep.
have them. I really enjoy my tortoises. I sit down. I'm outside. I drink a beer and I watch tortoises.
Yep.
I'm a very boring person.
No,
So
man,
yeah.
those are cool. I literally have a sulcata in my backyard right now for that
Yeah.
exact reason. It's
Yeah, I
awesome.
just sit down. I watch them for hours. I cut papaya, mango, all of that stuff. I just do their thing, and then obviously I'll collect eggs, and I do pretty well. Moving to this new property, that threw them off. Like they didn't know what to do.
Really?
So it took them up until probably just a few months ago to actually acclimate and adjust to their new enclosure, and start producing for me again. They were dropping eggs without digging. They were just circling the
Wow.
perimeter. Yeah, they were just going crazy, just circling the perimeter. They just didn't know what to
So
do.
how
They were completely
far
lost.
did you move?
Only 8 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And even just a small move like that, really, not just the tortoises, but it really threw off a lot of my animals. Um, so last year was pretty much, as far as like my projects that I personally breed. That
Uh-huh.
last year was pretty much just non-existent for me. And then what was
Wow.
gravid either reabsorbed or unfortunately got egg bound in that process, which was kind of
Wow.
that was a big bummer.
Yeah.
So yeah, luckily the tortoises just now bounced back. They're finally at home. They're comfortable. So now they lay their eggs. They go into their shelter. They don't circle the perimeter anymore. So
Right.
they're comfortable. And the same thing with the rest of my other animals. They've adjusted, fairly okay. And then there's some animals that just couldn't care less. So like the Chinese boxers, you could put them anywhere and they're just like, okay, I'll eat random stuff and I'll
Yep.
produce. So yeah. And the thing is, I used to live in a homeowners association, and for years they had no idea I had all this stuff. And I don't know if anyone who's familiar with homeowners associations, but they're very strict on rules of
I
your
was going to say
house.
that probably wasn't in the bylaws somewhere.
Yeah. So luckily, like I was very smart and well, not I wouldn't say smart, but I covered. You're not allowed to have a fence either, so I had a lake behind my house. It was beautiful. And I had a screened-in pool, so the animals in cages and screen cages were inside the screen pool, and then like my
Okay.
tortoises and some other stuff were outside, where literally anybody could come and look at them. So I covered, instead of having a fence, I kind of covered those areas with elephant grass, like
Oh,
7 feet,
okay.
7 feet of grass. And so if you were to walk by my yard or walk by the sidewalk, you would just see this giant plant wall and not even know I would have animals.
Right.
Unless you heard like the redfoots trying to breed and then you thought I had chickens.
Yep.
But I was always afraid one day that they would just randomly do something in the lake or come by to do some work and be like, what the heck? Because the rules of I actually researched it, so there's no breeding of any animals, whether it's like breeding of dogs
Oh.
or any exotic animals in that homeowners association.
Oh, wow.
I'm assuming outside because they can't really come in the house, but I was doing it for like 10 years. never, yeah. But I knew eventually, like obviously, like a bigger family. You know,
Sure.
we have a young toddler now. Um, so with the baby, growing family, a tortoise that could potentially get over 500 pounds, a bigger property was kind of something that we needed. Um,
Right.
and not homeowners association. So I have a property where we can pretty much do whatever I want, what we want, and no one can tell me that I can't put a fence up or I can't do this or I can't do that. So been been very happy with this move.
Right.
So the freedom of what I can do, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then um I think you might have mentioned it earlier, but Eric asked during the move, was the Serratus, was that one of the ones that went egg bound during the move that you were talking about?
Yeah. So I
Yep.
had a big like totally not related to my group, an animal that I found on my own. I got it, acclimated it. It bred for me. Had several clutches for it from it, um, and it's one of its last clutches. Um, was during the time of us actually moving back and forth. You know, so it did not do well at all. It kept those eggs. I did everything that I usually do to get these things to lay their eggs, because when I notice certain animals laying eggs, or in the process of that last bit of being gravid, I'll take them and I'll separate them into like a lay bin. And I did
Sure.
that for this one, and it just would not lay. It would just, it stayed on its little perch, and because I kind of set up in a certain way, and just it would not have it. And eventually it started to deteriorate, like it was just withering away. It was just basically, there's pictures, you can see it, where it's gravid. It literally looks like it swallowed a bunch of jelly beans, but its arms and legs and the base of its tail are just completely just shriveled up.
Right.
And there is kind of like a good story to it, because the bad story is it passed away, which was terrible because it was bloodline that I did not have. It's actually that female that the person contacted me that had it for just pet. Um,
Right.
so once it had died, I immediately got a knife, I cut it open, pulled the eggs out, incubated. That was like really like, while my family is moving furniture and putting stuff inside the house, I'm in the garage, opening up a lizard and pulling eggs out of it. And I've been in a situation before, like with basilisks, and with the helmeted iguanas, I had that same situation, and it worked 0 times of me pulling eggs out and trying to incubate them. It
Right.
actually worked this time. So I actually was able to salvage those eggs. So
Wow.
that was the good thing. I did salvage those eggs, and they
That's
did live.
nuts.
Yeah. First time
That's
I've ever done. It's the first time I've ever done that successfully.
wow.
And it was to the point where I've done it so many times where it failed.
Right.
To the
Sure.
point where when this happened, I was just like, should I just dispose of it? But I was like, no, you gotta try. Opened it up. It was 6 eggs, and out of the 6 eggs, 5 were fertile, and they all hatched. So
Wow.
it's crazy, but yeah.
That's wow.
So, and when I say that it happened a lot, I mean I've kept a lot of animals over the years, and unfortunately,
Sure.
sometimes you get a bunch of wild caught stuff, and you do your best to try to acclimate them, and sometimes they do come in gravid and they don't make it. So I've done this process before, but that was the one time that it actually was successful. But yeah,
Yeah,
broke my
for
heart
sure.
because it was a full grown
Yeah,
adult
I don't
female. Oh man, that killed me.
right. I don't think people quite realize, especially on the import side of things and wild caught stuff, like that's a very common, for things to come in gravid, and that, I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about, for folks that are going out trying to catch these things, um, a big old fat female that can't really get away very well because she's loaded full of eggs. It'd be an
Yeah,
easy thing to grab off that tree.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it happens more often than I think people realize.
yeah,
Um, but that sucks, but is also, I mean, it's really to our huge benefit. If you are able to hatch those eggs, if you are able to acclimate those babies for live bearers or what have you, like, it really does give us a huge jump on getting that next generation. So I mean, there is a silver lining to that, you know, and
Yeah.
then to have those experiences, like, you know, you were saying that you'd had no success before, but you knew the process of what it was you were doing. And so,
Yeah.
you know, you
It's not a fun
just kept
process. It's
working.
not, yeah, it's not
Right.
a glory. Yeah, it was gross. Kitchen knives that individuals in this house don't know that I used and disposed of them properly. Um, but yeah, it was a process that when I actually saw, because what happens was I did that in the past, within just a few days, those eggs would just mold and they were bad.
Sure.
When
Yeah.
this happened, within a few days, I saw vein development, and I was like, "Are you serious?" And no mold, nice white shells, and yeah, it was great. So
For sure.
yeah, yeah, not a fun process. Again, it was worth it at the end. And
Right. And it, you know, it had positive results. You know,
yeah,
it it would have, I mean, obviously you would not have known, but like it's it's terrible to lose an animal. Like we, you know, we're all animal nerds, you know, it's upsetting to us in general. And breeding and going through that process is one of the more dangerous things you can do for your animals anyway. Like
yeah,
it naturally is stressful to them, and it increases the risk in general.
yeah,
Um, but then,
100%.
you know, to feel like you missed that opportunity, you know, especially someone like yourself who had experience previously attempting that, you know, it just would have felt, I would feel like it was a missed opportunity, you know, and then now to have the confirmation of your success, you know, that's awesome.
Yeah. And again, that's wasn't a fun situation, but I was very happy with the results of it. And
Yeah,
those
for sure.
babies, fortunately, those babies are with someone else. They was not part of the raccoon attack, so that bloodline exists somewhere.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so that, again, full circle of happy ending for that one. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and the thing is, like those type of animals, you got to be careful when you're saying like breeding is dangerous for your animals. It's one of the most dangerous things you could do. But at the same time, successful breeding is kind of a sign that you're doing the right things for those animals. You know,
Sure.
if you're taking terrible care of them, they're not going to breed, especially these rarer species. There's certain animals that no matter what condition they're in, they're going to breed. But certain animals that the breeding and successful, you know, egg development and all that, that's just a sign of, hey, you must be doing something right.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and
Heavily. And that is a thing though, too, that kind of floats around herpetoculture as well, where, oh, well, you know, some animals would just breed in a shoebox,
yeah,
and that's true. But
yep,
species that you're talking about, a little more flighty, a little more high strung, higher stress, you know, like that, it's not true. You know, that
yep,
because they don't deal with those stressors as well, you know, as well as other animals, that makes them harder to care for, but it also makes them
yes,
harder to reproduce. You know,
yeah,
just because you can get that stress level to for the animal to survive does not mean you've lowered it to where the animal would thrive and reproduce, and it could throw off any number of things. um,
yeah,
and I think that is more of that's more of an attitude for folks who have probably had success maybe breeding some of the easier things, and then they, you know, you see the Craigslist type of stuff where it's like, oh, you know, Joe Schmo bred corn snakes in his closet, like it can't be that big of a deal. It's like, well, yeah, man, but that's not a corn snake. Like it's just
yeah,
harder
yeah,
to relate for some folks who have never
yeah,
experienced, you know, rarer
yeah.
animals
And
that are
I,
almost strictly wild caught, you
yeah,
know, that kind of
yep.
thing.
And I breed pictus geckos, which are one of those animals that no matter what condition they're in, they're going to breed and have babies. Like they do not care.
Right.
So I have it kind of like a balanced situation of I have these hard animals and I have these animals that just, they don't care. So
Right. That's cool. And I kind of feel like you need that. Like you've been very successful with the Coneheads, but like, man, that would just beat on you if it was constantly, these are super hard, super difficult. Oh, I really hope I get babies. It's like, man, sometimes I just want to have stuff that is like chill and gives me babies and is simple. Like you need that little, like a low
Yeah.
stress animal to chill out with and just chill and watch some redfoots, man. And then
Yeah.
pray for the conehead, like
Yes. That's yes.
you need a
That's
balance
kind of
there.
that's kind of where I'm at. Watch the redfoots, watch my other stuff, my easy stuff. Um, Watch my I do a lot of leopard geckos. I have dragons. I do all these things because I do the reptile shows constant,
Sure.
pretty much full time. So I have all that easy stuff. And at the end of the day, you pray that your water dragons have a nice clutch, your coneheads have a nice clutch, all the rare stuff that you kind of focus on have a nice clutch, successful clutch.
Right.
So yeah, it's good to have that balance there, for sure.
For sure. All right, man. Well, we're cruising to like an hour and 40. So is there anything you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask, or did I miss anything? What do you think?
Like I said, the one thing I had was the whole outside thing being easy. So we got that out of the way. It's not easy. It's actually it can be difficult. But yeah,
Lies. It's all lies.
Yeah. Come to me during winter and we'll see. Or any other time. It's actually,
right?
Like I said, it is there's a lot of challenges to keeping animals outside. So
for sure.
It's not
absolutely
the easiest thing. Like literally the only animals I can keep outside all year round are 2 species out of like probably 20 species I keep outside. So
yeah, for sure. And like I said, I really do that's a perception thing, folks. When I'm sitting here in a foot of snow chilling in the Midwest, I'm like, man, that dude just walks out in his backyard. It's like the Everglades, and all he did was screen it off, which is
kind of. That's pretty much
completely untrue. And I know that, but when I'm sitting here and it's freezing, it's like, oh, jerks.
Yeah. Well, look at Eric. He posted a picture or a video of him keeping his helmeted iguanas in the sunshine of spring, and then literally the next day it was snowing.
Yep.
I don't deal with that. So
yep.
I am kind of lucky in that departure. So
yeah. Well, all right, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. I'm glad we got to finally have the face reveal for everyone out there in social media land. I'm sure they'll be happy.
It won't happen again for a while.
It looks like in the Facebook comments, you might have noosed Eric here into some trades for you. So you'll have to get him on a plane to Florida and build you some enclosures.
I'll put him to work. We'll have like a father-son thing. He can teach me how to build things and stuff. I don't know.
There you go. Perfect.
It'll make it happen. But yeah.
All right, man. Well, I really appreciate it.
And no worries. I enjoyed it.
All right.
I was nervous, but I enjoyed it.
I'm glad.
Right,
see ya.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. All right. Well, that was episode 12. Eddie Soto of Serpentera Exotics. I actually didn't know that he was nervous about the whole camera thing, or that about the folks on social media that were giving him a hard time about the face reveal. So I am really glad he decided to come on. I encourage you guys to look up Serpentera Exotics on Facebook and Instagram. I was totally serious when I talked to him about his Instagram, in that, I believe that you can scroll through and kind of get a vibe for people and see how maybe, their personality, or especially when you get to the reptile side of things, is kind of how they keep in their philosophy a little bit. And his pictures and his little short video clips and stuff, it really is. It's a ton of animal behavior, all the weird stuff they do, chilling outside in his backyard. And then quite a few of his breeding successes, of course. So yeah, I encourage you guys to check him out. I was really impressed with that. And I know that this was a departure from normal. We missed 2 weeks ago, last episode. For those folks that don't know, I have a job that deploys me to other places. And so I was not home during my last episode. I'm back home now. So I am on track to every 2 weeks on Sunday, keep on going. And I have a multitude of guests coming up. Actually, it's kind of cool. Eddie was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, and he was able to reschedule to this Sunday because the guest I had scheduled for this Sunday asked to move to later this summer. And the reason he asked to move to later this summer is because he's redoing his enclosures and wants to have everything set up so when we do the live feed here, He plans to show you guys all of his new enclosures, and his collection is centered around Uromastyx, which I thought was really cool. There aren't a whole lot of people that are specifically keeping that group of lizards, and he's one of the more successful folks in the States. And his rescheduling had to do with giving you guys a better video tour. So I thought that was gonna be really cool. And I really appreciate Eddie pushing back for me since I had to reschedule. So we will see you guys again in 2 weeks. Scott, I wonder how people keep up with social media as well. I try to do it when I'm traveling. That's really my time for it. Otherwise, yeah, man, life gets in the way. Every 2 weeks, I make a podcast. That's my social media outlet. I don't know. I wonder how people have time to write books and do cool Australian things, but somehow you're over there just living that on Facebook. So there's got to be a way, man. All right. See you guys in 2 weeks. Later.